For Pacifica Radio, I'm Christina Onnested. Democrats Vice President Kamala Harris and her running mate Minnesota Governor Tim Walz will sit down for their first major TV interview of their presidential campaign tonight. The duo are traveling in southeast Georgia on a campaign bus tour. Republican former President Donald Trump will campaign in Michigan and Wisconsin. His visit to Michigan will be his third in the past 7 days. The Wisconsin stop tonight will be his first since he attended the Republican National Convention in Milwaukee. Before heading to Georgia, Walz campaigned with a speech in Boston at the International Association of Firefighters annual convention. And Trump's running mate, Ohio Senator J.D. Vance, campaigned in Pennsylvania, speaking to truckers in Erie Wednesday. Christopher Martinez has more.
Minnesota Governor and Democratic Vice Presidential candidate Tim Walz, a card-carrying member of his state's teachers union, boasted of the Democratic ticket's labor credentials.
Look, this is the time of year that talk is cheap. But that's why Vice President Harris is proudly part of the most pro-labor administration in history, unafraid to walk picket lines with workers demanding better pay and conditions.
While Walz was talking to firefighters in Boston, Ohio Senator J.D. Vance was talking to truckers in Erie, Pennsylvania.
You think groceries are bad? Wait until Kamala Harris makes every American trucker drive an electric truck. You think car prices are bad? Wait until Kamala Harris makes everybody buy a Chinese-made electric vehicle.
As for Republican Trump, an interview with talk show host Philip Calvin McGraw, known professionally as Dr. Phil. Trump talked about winning California, a state that has not voted for a Republican candidate since 1988.
I look at California. I gave a speech. I had a crowd so big. I said, there's no way I could lose California, but automatically they mark it down if you're a Republican as a loss. If Jesus came down and was the vote counter, I would win California, okay?
Reporting for Pacifica Radio News KPFA, I'm Christopher Martinez.
The United Nations Secretary General and European Union's foreign policy chief have condemned Israel's assaults on the West Bank, which have killed at least 18 Palestinians. The Israeli military says it's targeting militants connected to a suicide bomber in Tel Aviv. The Islamic Jihad group says one of its commanders was killed today in the West Bank. The United Nations Secretary General Antonio Guterres called the large-scale military operation with bulldozers that destroyed infrastructure deeply concerning, and he condemned the loss of life, including children. The EU's Joseph Borrell is proposing sanctions, including against some West Bank settlers and 2 Israeli top-ranking officials, National Security Minister Ben-Gvir and Finance Minister Bezalel Smotrich.
Launching hate messages, unacceptable hate messages against the Palestinians, and proposing things that goes clearly against international law and is an incitation to commit war crimes.
It would need support from a divided 27-member nation bloc. Israeli forces attacked a World Food Program vehicle in Gaza with workers inside of it Wednesday, forcing the agency to suspend movement of its workers during food shortages and famine in parts of the Gaza Strip. Cindy McCain, head of the agency, called the strikes on the clearly marked vehicle totally unacceptable. Here's Stefan Dujarric, a UN spokesperson.
Part of a convoy that had been fully coordinated with the IDF was struck 10 times by IDF gunfire, including with bullets targeting front windows. The 2 staff members in the vehicle were thankfully unharmed.
He also called for accountability when the war in Gaza ends, noting more UN aid workers have died in Gaza than in any other conflict in its history. With schools in session, protests against U.S. support for Israel's war in Gaza have resurfaced on university campuses. Students marched on campus and dozens held a peaceful die-in at the University of Michigan in Ann Arbor.
Israel bombs, U of M pays. How many kids have you killed today?
They chanted, Israel bombs, U of M pays. How many kids have you killed today? Police arrested 2 students. Video shows officers scuffling with one of them to the ground. A pro-Israel peaceful rally nearby demanding hostages be released had no arrests. In California, the president of the University of California's 10 campuses this week sent out a statement directing campuses to limit student protests, banning 10 encampments unless approved, masks that conceal identity, and the blocking of walkways and denying a person access to university facilities. The U.S. Supreme Court is keeping on hold the latest multi-billion-dollar student debt relief plan from the Biden administration as multiple lawsuits make their way through lower courts. The justices Wednesday rejected an administration request to put most of it back into effect. The Education Department is seeking to provide a faster path to loan cancellation and reduce monthly income-based repayments. Cost estimates of the new SAVE plan vary from $276 billion to $475 billion. Ukraine's Air Force says Russia's conducted a heavy aerial attack for the third time in 4 days, launching 5 missiles and 74 Iranian Shahed drones that were mostly intercepted. Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky is urging the Biden administration to loosen its limits on Ukraine's use of long-range weapons to strike deeper into Russia. His comments translated by Al Jazeera.
We are working with our partners to supply the front line. We continue to insist the restrictions should be lifted on long-range strikes. It will help us to end the war as soon as possible in a fair way for Ukraine and the world as a whole.
Ukraine President Volodymyr Zelensky. At least 3 people are dead as Typhoon Shansen hits Japan. It's issued a high-level weather warning. Environmental groups have sued the European Union for failing to set ambitious climate targets in sectors that contribute more than half the bloc's total greenhouse gas emissions. The groups argue the bloc isn't doing enough to meet climate targets established in the Paris Accords, including regulations on industries like agriculture, waste, and transport. Nurses in Iran are striking. Nurses' protests erupted following the death of a 32-year-old nurse earlier this month. Labor groups say she likely died from overwork. I'm Christina Onnested reporting for Pacifica Radio.